Yeah, no, and I think it's more because my friends, I think we are all in hustle mode all the time.
Yeah.
Not that it's a good or bad thing, but
I think your hustle is really good because it gives you self-esteem and it gives you fulfillment, and you realize you've got more to offer the world when you're then just sat at home. And I found when I wasn't doing much, when I wasn't as productive, I wasn't a nice person. I spent too much time consuming the wrong content. I spent too much time thinking about negative things in my life. Whereas when I'm busy, I respect myself more. And when I respect myself more, I have more respect to give to others. I'm a nicer person to be around. So I do recommend every woman, even if it's not for financial purposes, for your brain. I know women who are housewives, especially in our culture.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, the housewives for the last 6 years, and they come to me for therapy, and they'll mention what their mother-in-law did in 2014, and they'll talk about it like it happened yesterday. And I thought, I'm so busy. I don't even remember what happened last week. It's because they've got so much time on their hands. When you've got so much time on your hands and you're naturally not fulfilling your potential, you hold on to the negative. Whereas when you're busy and you're like fulfilled, what your mother-in-law did in 2016, who cares? But there's that empty housewife is filled with negativity, in honesty, because as much as I worship mothers and I think it's the best thing ever, it's not very rewarding because the children can't give the gratitude in the beginning stages.
Agree.
And they can't communicate with you, and you miss adult conversation, and also you don't have the energy to look pretty anymore. Sometimes you don't recognize your body, so all of those things makes you feel like you are no longer the woman you respected.
Yeah.
And then you come back with anger and hostility towards your husband because he's the only one you can blame.
Yeah,
because he's getting on with life. He still looks great. That
sounds like the pattern of like every little firstly come to you drama.
Yeah,
but also
that's
every
what
girl.
happens. It happens, and then they take it out on the man, and it's not his fault. I mean, he can't birth the child, but she doesn't know who else to take this resentment out on. And it's like the fact that he can just go to work. His body's exactly the same. His sex drive is exactly the same. Where in every area of her life has changed. So I always think when you get back to work, what it does is it at least forces you to try and get the weight back to where it used to be. At least put makeup on in the mornings. You start to fulfill your potential again. So that's why I encourage it. Not because I think financially, and I also think make child the priority. First 2-3 years, they should be the priority, but have something.
Yeah.
Have something if you can.
And so that pattern seems similar to like kind of what we grew up with, because I think in our generation, a lot of girls or a lot of mothers weren't working. I think the housewife
my
was
mom
more
didn't work. Did your mom?
My mom didn't work either. So it was more common, I think, as opposed to now.
Did your mom have lots of potential?
Yeah.
Mine too.
And I can see it. And I know that she really tries to drive it through me and my other sisters.
That's what my mom does. Yeah.
And just, I guess that makes sense, like the way your mom kind of drove you to like
she's
pursue
got so
this
much
career.
potential.
Same.
She should never been at home.
Same.
It's not for her. She's so social. She's got so many skills and stuff like that. She's not designed for it. So it led to resentment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about that with my grandmothers as well. I'm like, there's so many different generations to bring me to where I am for the freedoms I have.
That's
and
amazing.
But what am I supposed to be doing with this? Like, I'm always freaking out. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
What do you want to do?
I mean, what I'm doing, but I think I'm thinking more in terms of like even the marriage prospect, right? Before my generation, everyone was arranged was a thing. And since you're from Kashmir, I'm assuming it was the same.
Yes. Yeah.
So now in our generation, and all my friends wanted me to ask you this.
Yeah.
We're dating. What are we supposed to now be looking for? What are we supposed to be asking? Because I think there's so much weirdness now in the dating. We don't have our moms to kind of prepare us because they didn't date. Like a lot of them didn't. Our friends are kind of like, I've only had one relationship in college, so like it worked out. But like the ones that are like kind of navigating the pool, what are we supposed to be like?
You know what? The demise of the arranged marriage is something that now, as I can look back, I actually think it was a really good thing. And I know it sounds bizarre. The reason I say this is because we as individuals overestimate our individuality and underestimate background and family and culture. Okay. So when we're looking for a person, we're thinking we connect, we get on. But the reality is you get on, but what will keep you getting on is if you have shared values, cultures, and beliefs. And when parents are selecting somebody, they're selecting that. They're selecting somebody who's got a similar background, similar kind of household, similar kind of family values, and they put you together. And so what happens when they put you together is when you run out of love or when you get annoyed with each other, you have the same belief systems. So what happens is you find a common ground in some ways. Whereas when, take for example, I'm British, and then I meet somebody who grew up in Germany, and he's not from the same culture, nothing like that. Of course, we can really get on a surface level, but when push comes to shove, our values come into place. Our culture comes into place. What do you think is normal? When we have children, what do you think is normal? What do I think is normal? And when those things, this is why people from different cultures end up, unfortunately, more likely to part, because the belief systems break down.
Okay.
And when you're finding a partner, we look for chemistry and connection, when really shared culture is important. And when I say culture, I don't mean the same ethnic background. Same views on what school should we send the kids, what age can they be allowed to drive, what age, all of these things, how do we split the finances? All of these mundane things become more important as you develop in your marriage. And when you're selecting by yourself, you're not thinking about these things. So that's why I'm now thinking I can understand why arranged marriages were a thing.
But do you think we look for chemistry and connection because that's kind of something that we never saw growing up?
But you know what we did see growing up? Commitment and duty. And chemistry and connection is temporary.
But do you think, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, a lot of marriages of that time were more situational, and it's kind of like she couldn't leave. Like, our moms they couldn't leave.
But here's the thing. We assume that connection and chemistry is permanent. It's just not. It's just not. Majority of the time, it's not. But what is permanent and what decisions they did make is, how do we keep this family together? And what happened in our parents' generation is they became committed to the marriage, not the person. The marriage has to work because the kids need both of us, and the kids need access to, both our financial situations, and they don't need a step parent and a step mom and a step. They need that cohesive environment. They need to know that grandma's here, granddad's there, blah, blah. But what's happening now is, if I don't like you now, I can leave you. But the kids are the ones that suffer. And I know they suffer when they see parents not madly in love. But one of the perks of when your parents do stay together is little things like your wedding day, or your graduation, or it's little things like you'll call mom and say, has dad eaten today? Yeah, he's fine. He's just, he's just watching TV.
Yeah.
Whereas that worry you have between splitting your time and that impact divorce has on your ability to maintain a relationship is something that is underrated nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think it has an impact.
And I think, unfortunately, the society, at least in our Pakistani culture, people are looked down upon, especially in that generation, like, oh, your parents are divorced, why?
Yeah.
And I know that in our family, or even in my friends, is always like, yeah, our moms just, it's a thing. Like, how's the parental situation if you're considering someone, which I don't agree with.
Yeah.
But it's a reality, and I know that was a huge factor.
Yeah, I think what I disagreed with in Pakistani culture is they labeled it as what will people say?
Exactly.
But I would understand if someone said, well, what impact did it have on this person? Like, say, for example, if your parents are divorced and my brother wanted to marry you, I would ask, did she keep a connection with both parents? What impact did it have? Is she okay? As long as she's okay, it's all right. But when someone's been massively traumatized and hasn't healed from that trauma, their marriage is going to be difficult. It is going to trickle into their marriage. From that perspective, I can understand. But from a judgmental perspective, oh, she's a single mom, that is just cultural, and it's embarrassing, and there's no positive consequences from that. But I do think when you do come from some kind of trauma, it doesn't have to be broken home, it can be anything. I think a logical question to ask before engaging in a relationship is, how did that trauma impact your view of love and relationships?
Is that a heavy question to ask before getting into a relationship?
Who cares?
What are you supposed to be asking before getting into it? Like, what are the things? Like finances, maybe? Like, there's so many books written on it.
Yeah.
Islamic and like